Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Rosh Hashana, daf Yud Gimel. We're going to begin on the very bottom of Yud Beis with Beis, the very last line. So we were learning the requirement of taking off Trumas and Meisers, and depending exactly what type of food it was. So he said when it came to Zaysim, when it came to olives and for grain, it's Mishiavu Shlish. Once it's grown a third, at that point already, we say that it is that is the cutoff point, and therefore, as we mentioned, even though it says Chag HaSukkos regarding Hakel, and it says it's the Shnasa Shemitah, which the question is already the 8th year, it's coming to tell you that even though it's the 8th year, there's some things that were growing in the 7th year, namely if you had Tavua that grew a third during the 7th year, before Rosh Hashana, we're still neg minig shvius on the Shminis as well, on the 8th year as well, because of its growth during that time. Before we continue, if you look at this Rashi in Hanmili, Tavua v'azesim koi, the Meiser did who diraisa, because they're all diraisa. Manolan the basar shlish azli. The question we're discussing is how do we know that we go basar at having a third? The ilu yarak, when it comes to vegetables, the uzma yurabanan, which is din rabbanan, basal kito, we say it goes after the time it's harvested. The Elon de Azul Basar Chanata. And when it comes to trees, we go Basar Chanata time it's budding. Maisa did who min Rabbanan. V'lo min boil who min nolan. For that, we didn't ask the question. But over here, we want to understand. So, Amali Rav Zera Urabasi, as we continue Gimel Manalef, the Dilma perhaps will Ayil Klau. Maybe, as Rashi says, V'filu Hischilu was Bashel B'Shvias, even if it didn't begin to get ripened on the Shemitah year, Rachmana mitzvah shvius limashech esura Chag HaSukkos. Who says it's a third? Even if let's say it's not even a third. Become Rachmana to shamate, that you should still treat it as shemitah. The tezel ad Chag HaSukkos, and the shemitah will go all the way until will go until Sukkos. Lo sagadaita v'siv v'chag v'asiv v'seis Hashana. So my asif, what does it mean this holiday of the ingathering? Ilema chag haba b'zman asifa kasiv. It's talking about a holiday in which is the time of the gathering. Haksib bi'atzbacha. Pasuk says bi'atzbacha when you during your time of the harvest. Elmai asiv katsir. It's referring to the harvest. The kimul rabbanan the whole tavua sheniktsura b'chag, any holiday, any tavua rather that was harvested on Sukkot bi'adua shavu shlif ne Rosh Hashana. That's the whole drasha. Then it must be, if it's ready to be taken on Sukkot, before Rosh Hashana already, it was already a third growth. But kakarle b'seis Hashana. It's still considered to be last year's produce. Amr Rav Yirmel Rav Zer v'kimul Rabbanan ben shlish apachas meshlish. How are the Rabbanan so exact, knowing these measurements between if it's less than a third growth or more than a third? How do we see that the Chachamim are so meticulous in these measurements? Similarly, don't go against halacha. This is what the halacha is. This is the din that the Chachamim instituted. For example, Barboim sa who toivel, Barboim sa chaser kurtav enu toivel, enu yachalit boil. It must be exactly 40 sa. Even a drop less, we say, is not enough for your body to be immersed in without a chatzitza. So we say, well, even the smallest amount, the difference between chaser kortov, yes, fine. When it comes to the measurement of a beitza, that's matama tumas oichlin, foods. Kebeitza chaser shum shum, and matama tumas oichlin. If it's the tiniest amount less than a beitza, it's not matama. Shloish shal shloish matami medris. If you have a garment which is 3 by 3, then it's matami medris by lying on it. Shloish al shosha chaser nima achas means the smallest hair less than 3 by 3, and matami medris. So you can't ask questions on the shirim of the chachamim. Hadar Rav Yirmiyah la milsei diyomer debomine chabroi mirav kahana. He asked the question: Oimer shekrivu Yisrael bechnisas in the aretz. When it came to the oimer, which is brought on the beginning of Pesach, when the Bnei Israel entered La'aretz mehechen hekrivuhu, how are they able to have been makravit? So im tamidi ayal biyad nachri, maybe it was from all the growth came from a non-Jew. No katsir chem oimer achmana, lo katsir nachri. It had to be from our harvest. It could not have come from a nachri. So because of that, it's questionable how on earth we're able to have gotten the katsir sa'omer, the barley during that time. So Gemara says, "Mamai dak rivu." How do we know that we're makrabit? Dimalu akribu. Maybe they didn't bring the omer in the first year they entered Eretz Yisrael. Well, it says in the beginning of Yeshua, "V'yoichel mi avor haaretz mi mechar sapesach ochel mi karlo ochel." It says that they begin eating it only after Pesach, which means that before they didn't. So obviously there was the bringing of the omer, which was matir the grains, the new grains. So the akrivu omer b'hadar achli. Obviously they were makrabit, and then they ate. So the question is, mehech and hikrivu, how they do it? So he said, just as long as they didn't grow a shlish in the hands of the nachri. So the question is, maybe they weren't exact. El kimbahu hachanami kimbahu. They were exact. So in other words, what happened was that it did grow, but it grew less than a shlish, and therefore it didn't count, as Rashi says. The ayel biad nachri. It was growing until they entered, and then at that point it was a shlish, and then at that point it was already growth. So again, maybe it didn't go up at all. Maybe they weren't so exact. So it says that we entered into Eretz Canaan on the 10th day of the month of Nisan. If it didn't go up at all, so Yomi Mikamalia, is it possible again to say that it was able to grow completely in 5 days from the 10th of Nisan just until Pesach? El Madi'ayel Riva Odanka. Akati B'chamisha Yomi Mikamalia. How is it supposed to even grow that much? El Ma'isal Chamemar, Eretz Tzvik Sivba. So Hachanami Eretz Tzvik Sivba. So it's not a proof that they know it's just less than a third or a third, because it's possible, because Eretz Tzvi, says Rashi, Matzvi Kal Baragov, Mikol Achayos, is very light on its feet. Eretz Yisrael Kal Vashal Pirusel. It was easy for the fruit to grow. Mikol Haratzos, Hacham Afarshal Masechtas Ksuvos, etc. Okay. Maskav Reb Chanina. Is it possible to say the word osif is referring to harvesting? Which of course is a famous pasuk for Sukkah that teaches us how the schach is supposed to grow, has been taken from the leftovers. Which means that you have all this leftover in your silos, in your wine presses. So Amar Zera Hamilsa Habibiyah Navi Yasser Reb Chanina Shad Bein Narga, which is literally exactly the same lashon as in Sukkah over there when you're quoting this pasuk, that they basically threw an axe at this. Says Rashi, Had Milsa Habibiyadan Hainu Svurin Shenilban Mikan Shetivua Achashlish. We thought that perhaps from this pasuk taught us that the tevua grew after a third. However, he came and threw an axe. Remember the high Asif. Shaper mishtami bolishin dekra v'lav yiserhu. This is actually the proper language. It's not an extra pasuk to make this drasha. So therefore, we cannot derive anything from there. El manolim. So again, we're back to our question: how do we know this whole din of a shlish? Kedetani Rabbi Yona's son Ben Yosef Oyemer. Before we continue with the next line, let's quickly look at question 6. Be'ezet tarich. What was the date? Nichlasem Yisrael Aretz, of course we know, is the 10th of Nisan. Mehechen Hoyelahem Hatvul Oimer. How on earth did they have Tvua? So as we see in question 6, Shalo V'lochu Tvu Shlo Haviu Shlish. They took grain which was not a third growth, Umehera Lisbashal and Mimchar Pesach, and it quickly grew from that point on. Okay, so it wasn't an issue of Katsircha V'lo Katsirs Nachri. Fine. So the pasuk says V'yasa Satvul Shal Shashanim, that we say that the grain will grow for 3 years. It's going to grow for 3 years. As we continue in Gimel Amud Beis, So what do we see from this pasuk? Al tirki l'shalish el l'shlish, a third. So that's what it's coming to tell you. We need this to tell us the whole din, as Rashi says, Tshuva alma toichel b'shana shvius. The whole question was, how is a person able to eat if you don't plant anything? So this is the bracha that you're going to end up having food for 3 years. You're going to have the sivisias birchasi. You'll have the blessing of the 6th year. So ksiv krachrin ziratim es hashana chamishis. You'll plant in the 8th year. V'yachaltim in a tevu yashan ad hashana chis until the 9th year. Tanan hasam ha'oreis v'adoichin. When it comes to the rice and the doichin and the spillet and the millet of paragin, which are poppy seeds, v'ashimshmim and sesame seeds, shishrishu, from the time that they have taken root, l'fnei Rosh Hashana misasrim. That is the cut-off point. That as long as they've taken root, so that is one side, and l'sha'avar for the previous year. And mutar b'shvius, and they're mutar for shvius. V'im lav asurin b'shvius u'masul l'shana haba. So again, just like when it came to the shlish, that's the cut-off point before or after Rosh Hashanah. So too when it comes to these other foods, in this case it's totally on whether it's sheshrishu, that it's taken root into the ground. Omer Rabba, Omer Rabbanan, Elon Basar Chanata. When it comes to a tree, we go after the sprouting or the budding. Tvua v'zeisim, when it comes to grain and al, is Basar Shlish, as we said before, a third growth. Yarak is Basar Lakita. Vegetables is after the plucking and harvesting. So Hani Kaman Shavinhu Rabbanan. So these, what are the Rabbanan comparing it to? So Hadam Rabba Mitaych Shiasuyin Parachin, since they come crumbling from pods, as Rabbanan Basar Shrasha. So we say it goes Basar the rooting, says Rashi. Mitaych Shigarnan Asuyin Ma'at Ma'at, since it takes place small amount, nilkatin ke'echad, they're not gathered at the same time. Today you'll gather some, uprachim ma'at, and you'll crumble a little bit, ulmachar ma'at, tomorrow a little bit more. Nimsu chadash v'yashin murabin yachad. It turns out they're all mixed together. Hanifrachim lifnei Rosh Hashana, im nifrachim la'achar Rosh Hashana, im hoichim behen achar l'kita kishar yarak. If we go after the Lakita, then it's all going to be mixed together as it's all crumbled together. So therefore it becomes problematic. And therefore, Azibahu Basar Hashrasha, instead we just go Basar the rooting. Shibashana Achas Mishreshes Kol Asada. The entire field is rooted at the same time. So this way we're not going to have any things that are going to commingle. Why don't we just, what's the whole problem? So maybe just mix them all together. And you can just have them all mixed together, even though it's new and old. Maybe it's not a problem. After all, Tanya, Rav Yossi ben Keifar, when it comes to Pul HaMitzri, when it comes to this special Egyptian bean, let's say that some of it rooted before Rosh Hashanah, some after. In termin masrim mizel zeh, you can't take truma from one to the other because it's all totally on the hashrasha. Lafish in termin masrim lomin al chadash al yashan lomin al yashan al chadash. So you're not allowed to have them mixed, the new and the old. So keitzad huoisa. So what do? So cyber garno l'seicho, because you're not supposed to separate them separately, together rather. So you should mix the silo together. And by doing that, we'll say that the new is for the new and the old is for the old. So if that's what we can do by the Pul Mitzri, so why are we so concerned about these other things as well? You can just say that. So according to Rav Shimon Shaziri, he holds yesh bila, says Rashi. There's this mixture. Yesh lismach al bila, you can mix it. So he allows that it could be mixed. For Rabbanan Sabri ain bila, but the Rabbanan hold you can't do this, says Rashi. Ain semch al kach. Shish lemer lo nivel yafa veruba shel meiser min achadash aruba min yashin. You can't mix them together. So you're bringing down a shita regarding the Pul Mitzri that it can be mixed together, fine, that's one shita, but the Rabban holds you can't do it. So Amr Rav Yitzchak Bar Nachmani Amr Shmuel Halakha Rav Yosef ben Kefar Shemishim Rav Shemish Shazuri. That actually allows Bila. So Maskav Rav Zera Mi Amr Shmuel Hachi. Does he actually hold a Bila of a Amr Shmuel Lakoil Ein Bila Chutz Miyan V'Shemen? We say that there is no din of Bila with the exception of wine and oil. So he doesn't hold a Bila. So the answer is Ashta Mitnei Hadiyam Shmuel. He forgot what he said. Hakol Hoylach Acher Gemar Pri. That it all goes after the end of the fruit. Says Rashi, Dafa Kitnios. Even when it comes to legumes, Lohochel Behen Achar Shrasha. According to him, he does not go Basar Shrasha. It is, in fact, he holds that it goes after the Gemar Pri when the fruit is complete. It was Sricha, and you need both. As we continue down the Manal. Diashmin and Halach Rav Shimon Shazuri. If you say only that, how do you mean Misham Neksavi Yesh Bila? Maybe the reason why he says this, he holds the Yesh Bila that can mix together. Kamash One, Lakol Ein Bila. He says that no, it does not hold the Bila. The Yashmin and Lakol Ein Bila have a meaning of abundance really. Kamash One, Rav Shimon Shazuri. The Yashmin and Hani Tarti have a meaning Kash Dishmol Shmul. So Kamash One, Hakol Halachach Gemar Pri. He doesn't hold him. That's not a point of Bila because he goes Buster Gemar Pri when the fruit is complete. The Yashmin and Hakol Halachach Gemar Pri have a meaning of Tivu V'Zeisim Nami. You would think the same din is Tivu and Zeisim, which we say the din is you go Basir Hashrasha. Kamash one halacha that we go by Tivu and Zeisim, rather we go Basir Shlish. So Kamash Malan halacha Rav Shimon Shazuri b'may de polig, only on what they argue about. V'lashmi'inan hani tarti l'chol in bila ulamuli. So why does it say l'chol in bila? Hakamash one do yain m'shemen yesh bila. That there's a difference between wine and oil, which is a liquid, a davar lach, as opposed to a davar yavish, which we're going to explain in the questioning right now. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a few questions. Question 7. Basar mai ansi rabban bekitnios l'inin meiser. What do the rabban hold regarding kitnios? So, basar hashrasha. So one shot is you go basar the rooting. Or Yeshomer Basar Gemar Pri. It goes after the time in which the fruit has completed. Pul HaMitzri. Question 8 regarding this Egyptian bean. Shazar Lazar Miksaso Eshishlat Rosh Hashana Miksas Afar Hashana. Some of it gave root before and some after. Or Rabbanan Ein Lo Takana. There's nothing you can do. El Bahafrashim Makam Acher. All you can do is you can have to separate it from somewhere else. You can't separate from here because it's all a big problem because you've new and old together. So my sfar sachaluch whatever sheishlo takana the sphere is garnel asaychay. Why do some people that you don't have to separate it from another place? So the reason is according to Hashem Shazuri he holds yesh bila nimsa meiser mikol min amin lefi cheshbon. He holds that you can just take from each one and it's okay. Ikid tana the omer hakol halach gemar pri v'kul chadashu. Or you can say it's all like a new fruit, all of them. Even though some rooted before, some after, it doesn't matter because none of them had Gemar Pri, so therefore they're all considered to be new fruits, and therefore it's not a problem. So that's another possible shot. Okay, that was question 9. TA 27. TA 27. Pula Mitzri, Shazar Lazer Mesasa, Shishlat, Rosh Hashana, Sadaf Rosh Hashana, Him actually Lahafrish Mizel Zeh. Are you able to separate from them? O sorech mikol echad b'fni atzmai u'man zeh totally. So as we said, according to Uman the Armer shekitnius hochan achar gemar pri mafrishin mizel zeh, because they're all considered new. The one who says yesh bila biyavish, if it's dry, soiver grown of a you can put them all together. L'yidach man the Armer sorech lahafrish mikol echad b'fni atzmai. The other one will say that you're not able to do this. So this was TA 27. So again, he either hold, you go Basar Gemar Pri, and therefore it's not new and old, or even if you say you go Basar Ashrasha, if you hold the Ishbila, then it's okay. Fine. TB 29. Tevel chadash v'yashin shnis arvo. So you have tevel, new and old mixed together. He'im actually if ne psak halacha should be gemara lismoich al habila. Are you allowed to be samach on bila? Or meshesh b'meiser mishnehem of hi cheshben haroi. That you can just take it straight up. So b'lach yesh bila, b'yavesh ein bila. So, and that's what we said over here at the very end of this Gemara. It says hakamashmon deliyayin v'shemen yesh bila. Specifically, when it comes to davar lach, something which is a liquid, we say yesh bila. And if you look in this Rashi on the bottom of the Gimel Beis, or about 15 lines on the bottom, it says as follows: Yesh b'meiser shneim l'kfi cheshben, b'davar lach nivel yafeh. Because if it's something which is a liquid, so it mixes very well. Avol yavish and saimchen bo al bila. The fact that it's a mix, it's not really mixed very well by a davar yavish. So sakalacha by davar lach, because liquid mixes well, we say there is a din of bila. But when it comes to a davar yavish, because it doesn't mix as well, we say ein bila. Adkan.